Hello, back again with another Unity drama video. I really need to stop making these, but the rabbit hole just keeps getting deeper. And they're fun, what can I say? It's also good to get information out there because this stuff's important for consumers to know, especially in this case, because this might seem like positive news to some, but it's not quite the positive news you may think it is, and I'm going to go into why. John Riccitiello, however you say his name, I've said it. That's how I'm pronouncing it. I've heard it said a few different ways. Let me know how you pronounce it. Is it Riccitiello? Is it Riccitiello? How do you say it? Let me know. Also, apologies in advance. There's a few names I'm going to be name dropping in this video, which I make it wrong. Let me know. But yeah, John Riccitiello is stepping down from Unity. Now, a lot of people might see that and go, great, bad man gone, company good now, right? It's not quite as simple as that, right? There's a bit more going on, and this great Reddit thread that I found from about a month ago or so is even more relevant now that John's leaving. And I'm going to sort of skim over it for you here just to sort of discuss some of the points. I'll link it below in the description if anyone wants to take a look at the actual Reddit thread. But yeah, I'm just going to sort of gloss over it here and give my take, which is largely just the same as the thread, but you know, just to make people aware that it exists for the most part. So yeah, as the title explains here, you know, John Riccitiello isn't necessarily solely to blame. People don't necessarily want to hear this, but that's true. Companies very rarely are run by one person and one person only. Companies are usually made up of what they call a board. You have multiple C-level executives, directors, multiple people in charge of making the big decisions. And John Riccitiello was just one of those people. He was a CEO, but there's also, you know, a CFO and other C-level execs to influence decisions. Especially when it comes to the finances and things. Right away, he's not necessarily solely to blame for that. He might have had a hand in it, but we don't really know what goes on behind closed doors. All we know is there's a few people involved here. And he has certainly made questionable choices in the past. He certainly said a few interesting things in the past that people aren't a fan of. And I, for one, hope he doesn't necessarily work in the games industry again, because let's be real, we don't really want him in it. But yeah, it's obviously not for anyone to decide. He's a man in a powerful position and has a lot of connections, so don't be surprised if you see him pop up somewhere else. You don't necessarily want him, but you know, as I'm going to go into, he's not solely to blame for this debacle anyway. As it goes into, there's a few different names on the board which are important here. So there's Tomer Barziv, again, sorry if I'm saying the names wrong, but I don't speak so good. I don't speak English so good. Yeah, so Tomer Barziv, Roloff Boffa, don't know if that's how you say it or not, Egon Durbin are questionable in their own ways. So we'll go into why just below that. First of all, IronSource. Tomer Barziv was the founder of IronSource, which, if you know that name, they were basically known as being basically a malware distribution company. They sold and distributed malware under the guise of it being monetization software. He's not popular either. He's an interesting fellow. But they were bought by Unity for 4.4 billion. And the interesting thing about that deal is Unity were paid 1 billion to buy IronSource for 4.4 billion, which is kind of weird in itself, by Sequoia Capital, who are a venture capitalist firm. And that particular firm, if you don't know what that is, by the way, a venture capitalist firm, they're just like an investment sort of firm that buy up shares in companies and things, invest in them, and basically try and turn a profit through investing in companies, essentially. Yeah, so the interesting thing there is the founder, not the founder, the director. Don't know if he's the founder or not, probably not the founder because these companies go back a long time usually. But the director of Sequoia, and he's also on the board for Unity, right? But yeah, they obviously pledged to invest $1 billion into the deal. And what's the most interesting thing about the deal as well is that there was actually a $17 billion offer from a rival company known as AppLovin, who deal with mobile games primarily, I believe. Mobile monetization, specifically, according to the Reddit thread. And that was turned down. So there's something a bit weird going on there. There's some sort of shady deal going on. Certain people getting something out of it in the long term that makes it viable, a lot more viable, and a lot more sort of in the best interests of certain people, shall we say. We don't know why, but it's certainly on paper very shady for obvious reasons. As we mentioned, obviously, Tamer Bar-Zeev, founder of IronSource, Roelof Botha, he is the director of Sequoia. All these guys are on the board of Unity, by the way. More people to pay attention to. And also there's Egon Durbin. Egon Durbin was he was on the board for Twitter, actually, when Elon was sort of in the process of buying that. And Elon was, while he was buying Twitter, Egon was actually removed from the board of Twitter because it turned out he was actually spying for Elon, which, interesting. So that's why people know his name. But also he was involved in the whole taking Tesla private scam thing happened a few years ago, which if you keep up with finance news at all, basically a few years ago, I can't remember the exact year now, I'll probably edit it in, Elon basically threatened through a tweet to just take Tesla private, even though it had been a public company for many years at this point, which is not something you can just do. It was a bit weird, but anyway, he was involved in all that as well, apparently. So all these guys are on the board of Unity currently still. Roelof as well, also interesting thing to note as well, he was the CFO of PayPal, which, if you don't know as well, Elon was actually a big founder of PayPal as well, so interesting. And it's weird how Elon ties into all this stuff. If you go deep enough down the rabbit hole, it always goes back to Elon Musk. Tech industry's weird. Anyway, so basically, these guys have all been involved in shady deals in one way or another, and they're all on the Unity board still, even after everything has been said and done. An interesting thing to note, I think I forgot to mention about Tamer Bar-Zeev as well, the founder of IronSource. He sold a bunch of shares, much like John Riccitiello, before this whole sort of install tax thing went through, the install fee. It's interesting because although John Riccitiello was also selling shares, he's been doing it for the better part of a year or so. Tamer Bar-Zeev, the vast majority of the shares he has sold, which it's a lot of shares, it's not quite as much as John Riccitiello's, I don't think, but Tamer Bar-Zeev sold most of his shares quite recently before it was announced. So it's almost like they knew this was going to backfire in some way. Basically, the summary of this whole thing, as the thread suggests, is that while John's done with Unity, and he was probably done with Unity before this whole install fee thing came about, there's certainly other people here to be keeping an eye on, and there's certainly other things potentially going on behind closed doors that we don't know about. Should people be going back to Unity and using Unity now that John's gone? I would say absolutely not, given this very enlightening thread. It's not the kind of company I'd be investing in, say as a business owner, if not just a dev, but if you are trying to run a game development studio, if you're trying to actually develop a game and monetize it and actually create a business from it, then I would not be relying on Unity for that, because it sounds like it sounds like at a moment's notice things could all change and all of a sudden everyone's being scammed in one way or another by the guy who distributed malware and co. But yeah, it's definitely a weird one for sure, and I'm not going to make too much more videos on this because it's probably there's going to be more developments and things are going to be, people are watching these guys like a hawk now. So there's always going to be new information coming out, I think, as time goes on. But I just want to make people aware that this news specifically doesn't necessarily change things. You should stick with any sort of alternatives you might be going with. Open source things like Godot, open source engines. If don't know how many open source engines that are viable really for businesses, but Godot is certainly one of them, especially if your game's sort of smaller in scope, sort of maybe like a 2D game or something. And of course, if you need something a bit bigger, something like Unreal is still viable. Doesn't necessarily mean that they won't do anything in the future like this, but I highly doubt Unreal are looking at this and thinking, I think we can make that work. Yeah, I think they're safe for now. But yeah, it's it's quite the situation. Let me know what you think about it. Let me know if I've missed anything here. I just thought this particular Reddit thread as well hits it on the nose quite well. So I just thought I'd point that out. Again, description below if you want to have a look at the thread. Yeah, comment below what you think, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.